Hello again, everybody. This is Stan Scott with Foggy Bottom Line Media,
This is Scott Konopasek.
and we're here today to do our weekly podcast, Foggy Bottom Line podcast. It's Wednesday morning, December 3rd, my brother's birthday, by the way. And we're going to do something we wouldn't normally do because there have been some new developments in the unlawful order situation that we talked about last week when the two senators and four congresspeople sort of let the troops know they have their back if they have to disobey an unlawful order. And an article in the Washington Post came out yesterday, I think, describing the first attack on the Venezuelan drug boats back in September 2nd. And it looks like Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, gave an unlawful order. He ordered, basically, he said, the order was to kill everybody. So he gave a kill 'em all order, a no quarter order, which is illegal in the first place. After the first missile hit the boat, drone footage showed two survivors hanging on to the wreckage. And an order was given to hit the boat again and kill these two survivors who at this point were no longer in the fight. They were basically shipwrecked. They were no longer a threat as combatants. Which makes killing them pretty much a straightforward case of murder under the laws of war and an unlawful order. So that's what the article said. That's what we think is happening, and there's a lot of facets to this. But I'm going to give you a chance to weigh in here, Scott, with your thoughts, right quick.
Yeah, well, this revelation about the order to kill everyone kind of throws a little bit of light on what we were speculating last week, that one of the reasons that the administration, the Trump in particular and Hegseth in particular, were so upset at these six lawmakers for this was because they had or were intending to issue illegal orders, unlawful orders. And it appears that they had already done that, and we didn't really realize that. So that explains a lot right there. But it's arguable. One you could argue both sides whether or not it's lawful to be attacking these boats in the first place, and if the designation of narco terrorist is adequate to justify legally, sinking those boats. So that could go either way. But even if it was determined to be lawful to attack the boat in the first place, as you pointed out, the survivors were no longer combatants, and the laws of warfare require or prohibit attacking them and killing them. So whether or not the first order was lawful, certainly the second order was not. And this also connects another dot for me in my mind, because it kind of explains or offers some validation of what I've heard is the reason for Admiral Halsey, the Southcom commander, for stepping down, for resigning and retiring. But maybe we can talk more about that later.
Well, first of all, let me touch on my thoughts on whether it's legal in the first place to blow up these boats unilaterally and with no sort of due process of any kind. The Trump administration's claim is that by designating these narcotics traffickers as terrorists, as a terrorist organization, this gives him free reign under the authorization for use of military force passed after 9/11 to go after them as a terrorist organization. I think that's an iffy claim. I think that those claims, and I've seen some attorneys, people who have expertise in this field, I've seen them argue that while that designation does give them authority to place sanctions, to prosecute supporters, to prosecute them under certain legal regimes, it does not give them the authority to simply use military force to take them out without identifying them as drug runners. We don't know if they're fishermen or not.
Right.
Now, the military has intelligence that we don't know about and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, running drugs doesn't necessarily make you a terrorist.
Right.
Or there's a lot of terrorists in our high schools right now,
Right.
right?
Well, I
So
agree with your analysis that just attacking them in general is probably an unlawful order. But I can't help but think back during Trump 1.0 when Duterte was I think that's how you say it, Duterte was the president of the Philippines, and he embarked on this wide-ranging, extra-legal campaign of just killing people that he accused and designated as drug traffickers. And Trump, at the time, voiced support for that and
yeah.
praised him for doing that, and mused that he wished he could do that. And actually now in Trump 2.0, it looks like he has taken that playbook and applied it here to Venezuela, which really leads, in my mind, to the next question: is why Venezuela and not Mexico?
Um, well, I think I can think of a lot of reasons for that. One has to do with trade, maybe, but could it be that something about Venezuela sitting on the second or third largest oil reserve in the
Yeah,
world? Could
I
that
think
be a
that.
factor? That wouldn't exactly be the first time the United States took some kind of military action as a way to secure oil supplies from a country that didn't want to cough them up willingly. But uh, I think what we do know is that striking the boat a second time with these two survivors, basically hanging on for dear life to a burning boat, that definitely was an unlawful order. And I think it's important to remember, you know, just let me reiterate real quick that this happened on September 2nd, right? So this happened several months ago. This was the very first attack like this. It was the first one, and it brings to my mind some interesting thoughts about the timing of the retirement for two senior military leaders, Admiral Halsey, who was the commander of Southcom, which is a geographic command with basically oversight over this part of the world, and Lieutenant General Meek, an Army general who was on the Joint Chiefs of Staff as the head of policy and plans. And these two folks both retired in October. So it raises the question in my mind of whether these guys were forced to retire because they pushed back on this, both as a policy matter, as a methodology
Uh-huh.
matter, and then the specific tools used to go about interdicting these drugs, if that's what they're doing.
Yeah,
And the worst part is Hegseth. What yesterday in a video, he basically threw Admiral Bradley under the bus, and Bradley's JSOC, right?
right.
Yeah. So
Yeah, so
he basically said, "I didn't order that. Bradley did."
yeah, so it's interesting. These resignations and the soon-to-be tragic end of the career of Admiral Bradley, I think they're all interrelated to some of the conversations we've previously had about the oath of office
Mhm.
that we take in the military, and also this question of lawful orders. Now, unfortunately, former military officers don't always disclose why they did what they did, so
Right.
we'll never know for sure. But there's a couple of indicators for me that indicate that in the case of Halsey, that it was because he disagreed with the policy. Because typically, uh, the assignment to do all this would have been assigned to Southcom,
Hmm. Yep.
especially since Trump keeps threatening to invade or take military action against the country of Venezuela on land. So that falls uniquely into Southcom's portfolio. But then why is JSOC actually in operational command of these sinking these boats? It's not really traditional special operations to use a drone to blow up a fishing boat. Uh, but I can see a storyline where the Southcom commander said, we're not going to do it. So another commander stepped up and said, okay, I'll do it. And now we see what happens to people when you do that.
Yeah, right. Yeah. First of all, real quick, let me jump in here because some listeners or viewers may not be clear on these terms we're using. Southcom is a short version of Southern Command, which is the geographically operational command covering the South and Latin America, right?
Right.
It's basically the Southern Atlantic, Southern Pacific. This commander has control over operational units from all the services.
Yeah, air, ground,
Navy,
and
Air
sea,
Force,
and space.
Right, all of them. And he's responsible for any kind of military operations within that geographic area. JSOC stands for Joint Special Operations Command, which is basically brings together the different special operations unit. Think Navy SEALs, right? Delta Force, maybe
Special
Green
Forces,
Berets,
Army
right?
Rangers.
Army Rangers, all those. So JSOC would not normally be the command that would take on this kind of naval operation. It would normally be the geographic commander. So I think it does bear scrutiny to the idea that I think you're raising, Scott, that maybe Halsey, as the Southcom commander, said, I'm not going to do this. And that ended in his forced retirement, which he's not come online about that yet, so we don't know for sure. But as a result of that, and I would guess that if Halsey did that, the next guy in line may have done the same thing.
Right.
And that forced Hegseth to call the JSOC guys and ask them, are you willing to do this? And maybe because they're special operations folks, they maybe have done this kind of thing before, if not illegally, then something that's sort of adjacent to that. Because, I guess theoretically, the Joint Special Operation Command operation to capture and kill Osama bin Laden was sort of borderline unlawful. Nobody complained about that, but they basically invaded another country to do it, with or without a permission. And then they basically just went in there to kill him rather than try to capture him, I think.
Right.
Maybe I'm wrong about that.
Yeah.
But
special operators always have a different set of rules of engagement, rules of operation, and it may not have been as clear cut to them that this may not be a legitimate thing to do, as it was to a conventional force commander.
Well, I suspect it's pretty clear to Admiral Bradley now that he's under that bus with tire marks all over his backside.
Right, and they're backing it up back and forth on it.
Yeah, that's right. He's backing it up on you too, because it's just And I don't know. Did you see the video when Hegseth said that?
I watched some outtakes from the cabinet meeting yesterday. And Hegseth was asked the question about did he order the second attack, the double tap, and he started talking. And I'm a former interrogator in Army intelligence guy. Human lie detectors, they used to call us. Well, all the little hairs inside my ears started twitching as I heard his voice and watched his face as he gave this BS story about he was too busy to sit around after the attack and wait for them to see if there was anybody left. He had to go to another meeting, and the general the admiral, he just did it. And he started to say he was justified in doing it, but he kind of stopped himself and just said, it's the fog of war. Certainly there is a lot of fog in war, just like the foggy bottom line,
Yeah, right. True enough. And remember, folks, this was the first one of these attacks. This is the first time the U.S. military did this. So it does kind of stretch credulity a little bit to think that the Secretary of Defense would delegate the very first one to someone else, that he wouldn't sit there and make sure that that was done correctly according to his guidance, and then he could delegate later on. Okay, now you know how I want this done, so keep doing it this way, right?
Yeah. So if you recall, there was a big social media splash and announcement, and the videotape of the boat being blown up was released by both the White House and the Department of Defense. I refuse to call it the Department of War. And so
Not until Congress changes it.
right. So his excuse that he had other more important meetings to go to just doesn't hold in any water, and especially since this was the first of a very sensitive set of operations. The guy in charge, the guy who gave the order, would sit there all the way through and make sure that everything got wrapped up nicely in a bow. So it's just incredulous that he would say that he left the room, and he never did. I don't think I've heard a direct rebuttal to the order to kill everyone. Now, that order could be interpreted many ways, I guess, lawfully, unlawfully. But he really didn't talk about, and nobody's really talked on the administration side, talked about that particular order that's alleged to have been given.
What do you think it says about possible pushback? Because there's a lot of discussion now about MAGA has its fracture between the Groyper wing and the Ben Shapiro wing on Israel. You're starting to see the Epstein thing has caused some Republicans to come online and push back against Trump. What do you think it says about this political coalition, especially support for it in the military, that this was leaked in the first place? I mean, this wasn't, investigative reporting found something. Somebody called the Washington Post and said, hey, you guys need to check this out.
Right. Well, I was really surprised, but happy that somebody did leak it. And then I was further surprised when the chair of the House Oversight Committee said, we're going to have some investigations into this. So a Republican congressman finally got off their ass and tried to do something to exercise a little bit of oversight and investigative power over the antics of the current administration. But, I don't want to, overstate the turmoil that might be in MAGA. I think reports of the demise of MAGA have always been premature.
Yeah, I think that movement still has pretty good legs.
Yeah, as long as Trump's still alive, anyway.
Yeah, that's a key piece, and I'm not sure someone like J.D. Vance has the chops to continue the sort of cult following that Trump has. But it does say something, I think, about pushback in the military services because someone who was in that room when Hegseth gave that order, which would make them a pretty senior officer or very, very senior NCO, if it was an NCO, came online and said, hey, you need to check this out. This is what happened, and I think this is illegal. So yeah. That's a piece. But
I would like to think that Senator.
Go ahead.
I was going to say I would like to think that Senator Kelly's video and reminder may have been the inspiration to get someone to come forward and say, hey, people need to know this.
I hadn't thought about that, but that makes a lot of sense. That
because the timing lines up perfectly.
And said, and then somewhere a major, right, a staff major. General officers have these aides. Senior officers have aides. It's typically a captain or a major, sometimes a light colonel, depending on whether it's a 2, 3, or 4 star. And these aides basically carry their stuff around and
dog robbers. We call them.
Yeah. I was a driver for a 2-star division commander for about a year when I was a staff sergeant. And so I did some of that stuff myself when the captain was on vacation, right? But so these guys are in the room when these kinds of things happen. So they would have direct knowledge of what was said and who did what. And I like to think, I agree with you. I hadn't thought of it, but I agree that I like to think that one of those guys said, you know what, Kelly's right. This is immoral and illegal, and something needs to be done. But I wasn't given the order, so I'm not the one to say I'm not going to do that.
Right. Yeah.
So
My understanding is it was four guys who came forward together, or four
oh, is that
service
right?
members. Yeah.
Okay.
So your theory that it was the dog robbers kind of makes sense
Yeah.
because they all would have been there in the room.
Yes, and they're all sitting in a chair around the wall, right, away from
Right.
the big table.
Flies on the wall. Yeah.
That's right. Well, dog robbers. I like that part.
Yeah.
So I haven't heard that one before. That's a good one. So, I mean, what's really going on here, though? We touched on the idea that Venezuelan oil might be a factor in this, but one thing we know about Trump is that the first thing you have to think about when you're wondering why Trump is doing something is, how does this put money in his pocket? And because that's all that this guy really cares about. He doesn't care about you or me or any of his MAGA fans or anybody else. All he cares about is lining his own pocket. And I think, I don't know how oil would explain that. I don't know how Venezuelan oil would explain that, unless he's getting some kind of kickback or something from an oil company or someone who just doesn't like Maduro or whatever. But it does raise an interesting contradiction, because this was supposedly all about interdicting drugs, cocaine and fentanyl and opioids and all that stuff from Venezuela. But the guy turns right around after bombing all these boats and pardons the former Honduran president, who was convicted and sentenced to what, 17 years or something?
Yeah. So 25 something, a really long sentence in U.S.
for
courts.
trafficking cokeine to the U.S.
Right. Yeah. So that kind of takes that rationale out of the way. You know, the other rationale, and the one that someone may have been able to accuse Obama or even Biden, is this is a left-wing socialist dictator running a regime. He's not legitimate. So maybe it's to have regime change and to resist leftist dictators. But you look at his friendship with Putin, and who's a left-wing communist socialist dictator, and Kim Jong-un, who is a communist dictator in North Korea. And you look at all these other people he's supporting, so you have to discount and throw out that reasoning as well.
Well, it wouldn't be the first time the United States of America intervened in a Latin or South American country to overthrow what they see as a communist dictatorship, when it was actually a democratically elected government. And I won't speak to whether Maduro and Venezuelan government is actually democratically elected or more on the dictator side of it. We do have a long history of protecting right-wing dictatorships in Latin America and South America, partly because of fear of communism and partly to make sure American corporations have access to the resources there. Think bananas, U.S. Fruit Company and all those, right?
Right.
Long time ago, but that's our history.
Yeah,
right?
So that's where the term banana republic comes from.
That's right. That's exactly right. But I think the difference between Putin and Maduro, I don't know if I'd call Putin a communist. I mean, he was certainly a communist before the wall came down and the Cold War ended. But I'm not sure. I would call Putin more of a fascist dictator now at this point. He definitely learned his chops under the communist KGB, but he looks a lot more like a fascist dictator at this point. And I think Trump wants to emulate him. But I think the big difference between Putin and Maduro is that Putin has something on Trump that Trump doesn't want out.
Right.
He's got some compromise on Trump that Trump doesn't want released. And Maduro does not. And the other difference is that Putin at least pretends to think that Trump knows what he's doing and he's a real president and a great leader, blah, blah, blah. and Maduro is basically telling Trump, you're not very good at this.
Yeah.
so, so he
Yeah, we
doesn't
would be
suck up to
hearing
him
more
right now.
chatter about Hugo Chavez as well if it was politically motivated and we're
Yeah.
looking for a regime change. But one of the characteristics of Russia is in North Korea is state owned or jointly owned state private ownership of large corporations. Uh, and Trump is kind of doing that sneakily with the U.S. by taking an ownership share in Intel, for example, uh, in
Hmm.
nudging us towards a statist capitalist kind of society, which is different than socialism and different than capitalism, uh, but might be the model that would allow Trump to cash in Venezuela.
Well, I think that we, for those of you who don't know the history of how Russia came to be the way it is now, when the Soviet Union fell apart, one of the first things that happened was all of the industry there, the oil industry, all the extraction industries, mining, oil production, manufacturing,
Agriculture.
everything
Yeah.
was controlled by the state. And they basically privatized this. They privatized all these businesses, all this stuff, the means of production, as it were.
Right.
The problem was that when they did that, they didn't really use a fair or democratic way of deciding who would own the means of production as a private owner.
All right.
So this created a set of oligarchs in Russia, right? And Putin is one of those. So the favorable handing over of the means of production in the Soviet Union to these men, mostly men, uh, created these oligarchs, these super billionaires. Okay,
Right.
um, and this is, I believe, one of the things I think is going on here is that the tech brothers, the Silicon Valley tech billionaires, the Peter Thiels and the Elon Musks and the Andreessens, along with Trump, are trying to create a similar situation in the U.S. where you basically have a dozen or 2 dozen super wealthy people who control everything and don't have to worry too much about the rule of law. So yeah, this could be something this could be related to that. It may be far more simple. It may just be that Trump is basically telling Maduro, "I want you to do this, and I'm going to keep blowing up your people until you do it."
Right.
And I'm going to pardon this Honduran president who brought 400 tons of cocaine into the U.S. because somebody paid me to do it. And
Right.
that's a serious allegation that Trump is actually selling pardons, but I think there's some evidence to support it. And it is an allegation. I don't have any solid proof that I could name right now, but it looks an awful lot like he's doing that. And that's one real good way to explain the disconnect between going after Maduro and these narco terrorists, quote unquote, in Venezuela, and then with the other hand, pardoning someone like Hernandez for doing what
Right.
he did.
So coming back to the privatization of state-owned means of production, uh, we don't know for sure, but I suspect that the privatization did not represent 100% of the assets or ownership. That the state retained a significant percentage of
Mm-hmm.
ownership. Uh, in Venezuela, the oil industry is wholly owned by the government. It's a state owned industry.
Right.
Uh, so if we were to go in and take over Venezuela for the oil and partially privatize uh, the the ownership of oil, then Trump's buddies and Trump himself could benefit, as well as the United States having, i.e., Trump having still an ownership stake, uh, probably a large one in Venezuela's oil resources.
Yeah, that would be one way for Trump to get his fingers in that particular cookie jar, and not to go all conspiracy theory or anything, but Trump is also heavily into cryptocurrency. And one of the ways that he could get paid for all this without a lot of, obvious scrutiny, someone actually writing a check that he has to put in a bank, would be by investing in these cryptocurrencies that he started, because basically those values stay up as long as people are buying them, right?
Right.
So if you wanted to give Trump $100 million, one way to do that would be to buy a bunch of his cryptocurrency so that the value of that goes up, right? And honestly, Scott, if you've read some of these books that were written when Trump first ran for president in 2015, 2016, a lot of the Seth Abramson stuff, the one book's Proof of Collusion, one's Proof of Conspiracy. Trump has a long history, and back to the Russians, he has a long history of selling Trump properties to Russians or Russian agents for much lower than the value, right? And buying things from them that were for cheap, and then reselling it and making money on it, right? So, and this is classic money laundering in some ways. But
And there's nothing easier than cryptocurrency to launder money. It makes it
exactly
completely untraceable.
Nobody knows where it came from. So,
Right.
and trying to explain all this, Occam's razor, the simplest explanation is often the correct one. And I think the best way to explain all this is that Trump is in this whole thing to make money. And if it'll make money for Trump somehow, he's okay with it. And he's going to disregard the rules because he doesn't think they apply to him. And so far, he's been right more often than not, right?
Right. One of the critiques that I have of the media pundits and just folks in general is we tend to look at all these Trumpian antics one at a time, in isolation from other things, and we forget, or we're willing to forget, or we feel like we need to forget that we've seen this movie before, and everyone wants to give Trump the benefit of the doubt ahead of time, that he's acting in a legitimate way. It's not self-serving and there's no ulterior motive. But it reminds me a lot of Charlie Brown and Lucy in the football, where Charlie Brown, Lucy holds the football for Charlie Brown to kick, a place kick. And every time Charlie Brown goes to kick the ball, she yanks it away.
Right.
And this goes on for years, and it went on Charlie Brown's whole life. So Charles Schultz, kept that theme all the way through. And Trump is Lucy, and we're Charlie Brown sometimes, and we believe that he's doing things for the right reason, or maybe this time he's not. And so that's one critique. The other critique is we don't look at all these events in aggregate. We look at them as individual points in time, or trees. To use a tree analogy, all these individual trees. And once you get to a certain point, there's enough trees that you have a forest. And a forest is very different than just 100 random trees. And we don't connect the dots, and we don't look at the larger picture. We don't see the relationship of all these things. And one of the things we've kind of done today in our chat is try to identify what some of these related events and points of time are, and propose some possible threads that connect them together, connecting the dots.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a lot of, I can think of several critiques of the media, really starting with the different ways Trump's apparent onset of dementia is being covered as opposed to the way they covered Biden's. Now, I think that's starting to change. I'm starting to see more and more media coverage. He's in a cabinet meeting this week, and he's literally falling asleep in the
Falling
middle
asleep.
of a
Yeah.
cabinet meeting,
Yeah.
right? I mean, he's literally falling asleep. And was it last night or the night before? He tweeted, he put out something like 400 tweets in the space of a couple hours. And they were just around the bend, crazy
Yeah.
tweets, right? Just nut stuff. And like he's up all night, and I don't know how that works. Maybe that's why he's falling asleep, right?
All right.
In the cabinet meeting, he was up all night tweeting, because I'd be falling asleep in the middle of this podcast if I'd been up all night last night.
Right.
And I'm not 80 years old, but it just seems like, well, there's too much buy-in from the media, even what the mainstream media, as some called it, and even what the fake news media, they're just covering all of this as if it's normal president stuff,
Right.
right?
As if Lucy's not going to yank that ball. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And it blows my mind that it's left to people like us and other podcasters, because there's a lot of good podcasts out there covering this stuff and talking about this stuff. But if you look at MSNBC and CNN and especially Fox, you're not seeing a lot of this discussion. And I think that's beginning to change. And what this looks like to me, Scott, is, when they thought he was powerful, they didn't want to cross him.
Right.
And now that he's starting to look a little bit weaker,
A little blood in the water. Yeah.
a little blood in the water, now they're a little more willing to go after him, because they don't have as much fear that he'll, block a merger of some kind, right? CBS gave him all that money because they wanted to merge with Paramount, right?
It was a bribe in public. It was a public bribe.
Total bribe.
We could just go on about campaign finance and about transparency and how bribery in public is okay because it's transparent.
And we will, but maybe not today.
Yeah, not today. Not today.
But just to circle back, we're coming up on 40 minutes, and we like to keep these between 30 and 45 minutes, so you guys don't get too bored with us. But just to circle back to the original discussion here. Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, not War, it's not the Secretary of War until Congress changes the designation, right?
He was confirmed as Secretary of Defense.
So Hegseth, apparently with Trump's okay, gave an order to strike a small boat in the Caribbean that allegedly was carrying drugs, okay? The United States military fired a missile at that boat, set it on fire, destroyed it, or crippled it at least, right? Drone footage showed that 2 people had survived the attack and were hanging on to the boat for dear life. And an order was given to strike the boat again to kill these 2 survivors of the initial attack. This is very clearly a substantial violation of the law of war. This was an unlawful order. And any claim made that it was not unlawful, that this was somehow an okay order to give, it simply isn't true. Okay? There's no argument you can make. And before we close, Scott, I want to get your thoughts on why that's important, because the reason we have these laws of war is to protect our own soldiers. Right? Because we don't want our own soldiers who are trying to surrender on a battlefield to be simply murdered. Right? And that's why we do this. That's why we have these agreements, and that's why we follow them. And there's a reason why other countries like Britain and Germany are starting to pull back on sharing intelligence, because they don't want to be associated with a nation that is blatantly flouting the laws of war and the agreements that we've made to conduct warfare and combat within certain parameters that sort of recognize the fact that when a soldier is defeated on the battlefield and they're ready to give up, or they've been put in a position where they can no longer fight and it's about survival, we have a responsibility to treat them humanely as prisoners of war. Final thoughts on that?
Yeah, you're pointing out the very fundamental principles that we were taught as young soldiers in our first weeks of being in the military. How to handle prisoners of war and our obligations, and what we could do and not do. And as you were talking about, or making the comparison of the fishermen in the water and soldiers on land, it sort of clarified things to me that it's really, really, I guess, really upsetting and disturbing that someone gave an order or set of orders that told U.S. service members to take the life of people who were hors de combat, or they had taken it, they were out of conflict. And who gave those orders? I guess that's the mystery that's going to take a couple more weeks to sort through, if we ever do. But the things that the 6 lawmakers were warning about, or the reason that they made their video reminding people that it's a military person's obligation to not follow unlawful orders, I think it was very, very timely, and it's something that Americans should think highly about. And one of the things that we were told as young soldiers is, if we shoot their prisoners, what makes you think they're not going to shoot you?
Right.
So there was a self-serving aspect of that as well. Anyway.
I mean, this kind of creates a vicious circle, because if we're doing this kind of stuff, then someone like Osama bin Laden thinks, well, these people are doing it to us, so we can just fly airplanes into their buildings. Right.
It's a moral equivalent. Yeah,
right. There's a moral equivalence there, and we need to recognize that and own it. Americans historically have not been very good at that, unfortunately, and that's one of our goals here, is to try to help us own some of our history and some of these current events that we're really kind of what's the word I'm looking for? We're undermining our own values and morals and ethics when we do these kinds of things.
Right. People always talk about the slippery slope in a hypothetical way. I think in a very literal way, America is sliding down the slope of our ethical values and principles and leadership in the world.
And the unfortunate part is that if you go on social media today, you'll see a lot of people defending Hegseth and defending this. A lot of people like it, and you'll see things on Facebook and whatever, Twitter. Well, they're drug runners and they're terrorists, so who cares about them?
Right. Or this is what I voted for.
This is what I voted for, and this is it's a huge, to me, it's a huge sign of moral decay in this country, that we can't look in the mirror and say to ourselves, we're not going to be that. We're not going to do that. We're not going to fall to that level and use those tactics, because we're better than that. We're not savages, and we're behaving like savages sometimes, and we need to think about that very hard. So anyway, so any final thoughts on all of this, folks? Much more to come on this because this is going to keep being an issue. The Trump corruption is going to keep being an issue. The unlawful order thing is going to keep being an issue, and we're going to keep talking about it. So, final thoughts there, Scott?
Yeah, I think we have a lot more dots to identify and to link together to kind of make some sense out of what's going on. Particularly in the realm of war and the use of military force in Venezuela and what the hell's going on right now, because it doesn't really clearly make any sense, the explanations were given. So more truth to be sleuthing out, more dots to be connected, and hopefully we'll be able to get enough people to realize that Lucy's going to yank that ball and stop acting like she's not.
Oh, yeah. Well, I remember when we were kids reading that, we're like, "Come on, dude! What part of she's gonna yank the ball don't you get?"
Yeah, she had all these persuasive arguments. Oh, I'll never do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like we're a nation of Charlie Browns right now, and Donald Trump and the administration is Lucy.
Folks, when someone tells you who they are, believe them.
Right.
And the Trump folks are telling us who they are. Who they are is they'll indiscriminately kill somebody they don't like. And right now, it's random drug runners, alleged drug runners on a boat in the South Caribbean. Who's it going to be tomorrow? Right.
Right.
And this is, I hate the slippery slope thing, but there is a slope and it's oiled up. So
yeah, and let's not forget that what's going on in Central America or South America and the Caribbean right now is running parallel to Trump sending National Guard troops into our large urban areas.
Yep.
And so it's all related. How is it related? Hopefully we'll find out.
More dots to connect.
More dots. Yeah.
Well, folks, if you want to listen in or watch while we try to connect some of those dots, you can find us at www.foggybottomline.com. We're on YouTube at Foggy Bottom Line Media and on other social media at Foggy Bottom Line. We're on Patreon now, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, RSS, all those. So check us out. Let us know what you think. Like, comment, share. We want to juice the algorithm and get this in front of more folks. So if you're a listener, hit that subscribe button. Doesn't cost anything, but it helps us spread the word. So let us know what you think. We do want feedback, good and bad. And if you like this or you think this is useful, do something to encourage us. Buy us a cup of coffee through Venmo or some other way. Or at least just send us a note saying, hey, thanks for covering this because it's an important issue. Or this is stupid, stop doing it, if that's how you feel.
Or give us a 5-star review.
Give us a 5-star review. Come on, man. You know you want to. So, all right. That's it for today. We'll be back next week with another Foggy Bottom Line podcast. In the meantime, keep an eye out for spot reports and other stuff. Again, keep your eyes open. Watch this channel because we've got some new stuff coming for you after the new year. And we're working on what exactly that looks like as we speak over the holidays. So take care of yourselves, enjoy your holiday season, your Christmas, whatever, Hanukkah, all those things, and let us know what you think. We will be back next week with another podcast. Scott?
Hey, great talking again, Stan. Thank you very much.
As always. Take care, sir. Carry on. Have a good one, y'all. Peace. We'll see you soon. Out here.